In the previous lecture, I think all of you have already visited the lecture on function, and I hope you have understood well. So in this particular lecture, we will actually go through a special type of function that we call recursion. Okay. So in case of function, what we have seen, what are the points that we have seen? Let's recap those parts. You see, these are the points that actually we can say in a nutshell about a function. You see the point I have given, how the function communicate with each other. So let's try to understand first this one. That what are the points that we have seen in case of function? The point number one is that any number of function can be called from a single function. What does it mean? It means that if you have a main program, something like this, main, and from here you can call f1, then f2, then f3. So you can have multiple number of calling. So what will happen? From if it is a main function, then from here an f1 may be called, from here an f2 may be called, and then from this main function f3 may be called, something like this, right? And what happened, from this main function, control jumps to this f1, and then after completion of the function f1, it return back, the control return back to main, and then according to at least this particular code, then f2 will be called again, and then the control will return back to main again, and then f3 will be called, and then control will back to main again, something like this. So that means you can consider that you can have any number of function that you can call one by one from a single function. That function may not be main, it can be from other function also. For example, from f1 you can call many other functions, right? Now see, the second point says that the exact number of returned value from a function is exactly 1. Now what does it mean? It means that when we write return statement in a function, so some function f1 I have written, and at the end if we write return, we generally write return x or return p or something like that, but we don't write return x comma p. This is not supported in C or C++ or Java, this type of language. We always return exactly one value if we want, not more than that. And maybe it's possible that you may not return of some value. In that case, the function will be what that we have seen. Now the third point is that what is written? The direction of calling a set of function is exactly opposite to the direction of returning a function. What does it mean? It means that already we have discussed this one in my previous lecture. If you have any doubt, if you are not able to recall, then you can go to the previous lecture on function. You can go in detail. But here I am just writing. I'm discussing this in a brief. That if it is a main function, from main I can call a function f1, something like this. It can be a f1 function, and from f1 function maybe a function f2 will be called. F2 is called, and then what happened? After completion of f2, if I assume that there is a return statement in f2, that means some value will be returned, or if there is no return statement, then also. So what about the control? Control means control of the processor on the function. When the control, initially the control is holded by the main, and when the function f1 was called, the control has jumped to f1. Then from f1, when f2 was called, control has jumped to f2. Now after completion of all the codes in f2, when the control starts returning back, where to return? We have seen that control must return back to f1 first, because of the special memory that we have, that we call stack, which follow a special strategy, what we call LIFO, last in first out. What is in? Actually, before jumping to f1, the function or the computer stores the address from where the jumping is happen of the main function. Similarly, when the control jumps from f1 to f2, the processor stores the address of the F1 from where it is jumping to F2. So these addresses are stored in this stack. So that means I can assume that address, say 100. From 100 address of main function, control jump to F1. Address 100 is stored. Then the address say 200. 200 means 200 is the address of the F1 function from where F2, control of F2 was jumped. So 200 gets stored. Now since 200 was stored later, that's why the first thing that will come out from this memory will be 200. That's why the last in, first out. And since 200 is coming out first, that's why what happened from the F2, when the control will start returning back, it will first find out the memory location where to jump from the stack. So it will get 200 and it will return back to 200. That is nothing but present in the F1 function. Similarly, after completion of the other part of the F1 function, when again the control will start returning back from F1, it will basically find out the next address. It will, this is what we call pop. We have seen, right? So it will pop extract the address from the stack and find 100. So from F1 it will return back to 100 exactly from where the F1 was called, right? So this is what we have seen. We will discuss over here also. So this is the point. Now the fifth point is that a memory for a function is allocated only when the function is called. What does it mean? It means the memory, if you call from when a function is called F1 from the main memory, till the function is not called, this memory space for the F1 is not created. So that's why it is written that memory of a function is allocated only when the function is called, not before. And this is just we have seen over here that the underlying data structure used in a function calling and returning strategy is a stack. That we have already seen. So you can say there are two strategies by which we can actually proceed for solving a particular problem. The strategy number 1 is called iterative, and strategy number 2 is called recursive. What does iterative strategy mean? Both are actually working the same thing. I mean, suppose that if I tell you that do one thing, print India 10 times. What you will do? You can have an option that you will print this particular word 10 times by 10 printf statements. Right? There is now to do this, what we can do, we can take help, what we call loop. This loop can be 3 different loops that we have seen, that for, while, and say do while. And what it does, it actually, if you write printf statement, printf India, somehow this particular statement is re-executed more than once, for example 10 times over here, so that 10 India is printed. And because of that, we have some strategy. We know that how to write for loop, we know how to write while loop, even we know how to write do while loop. But all these techniques are under this iterative technique. Iterative technique does not mean that there will be a function and within the function you have to apply the technique. You can apply this iterative technique even directly in main function also. There is no problem. So in case of, if I assume that you are a function and I am the main function and I have instructed you to print this India 10 times. So what you will do, you may use for while or do while in your part so that 10 India gets printed. You are taking you are the only one who is taking the responsibility. you are not distributing the job into multiple sources. And that actually iterative technique does. Iterative technique, or if I assume that there is a function which solve the problem in iterative way, that means the function is not taking help of any other function. It is actually doing by itself. But recursive technique is, totally different one. This recursive technique is very lazy. You can consider in this way. Lazy in the sense, recursive technique doesn't solve the problem all in one. It tries to break the problem into set of subproblems. And it passes the subproblem to one of its clone. Something like that. So that means, for example, if I give you that find out the addition of 1 to 5, one thing you can do, that means the function is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. If I assume that you are a iterative technique, that means you will take the responsibility for adding 1 to 5, all. But if I assume that you are a recursive technique, then you will not add at all. What we can do, you can keep 5 in your hand and call one of your clone and will tell him or her that you do one thing, you give me the addition of 1 to 4. So you will pass this part to one of your clone. And you are expecting that that clone will basically give you the result 1 to 4, addition of 1 to 4. And after getting the result, that is 4 plus 3, 7 plus 2, 9, 1, 10, what you will do? You will just add this one with your 5 that you have in your hand. And the result 15, you will pass to main. That means pass to me. You are not taking the responsibility as a whole. You are distributing the problem into 2 subproblems. In one side you have 5 and in other side you have 1 to 4. Now see, question is that since your clone is there, so clone means we all know that by behavior they are same. So if you call your clone to add 1 to 4, that means your clone will also behave in the same way. That the clone will take 4 in its hand and will call another clone who will add 1 to 3. And somehow this second clone is expecting that third clone will give the result addition of 1 to 3. And then it will simply add the 4 with him and return the result to the first clone. Something like that. So in this way, what I am getting over here, that the entire space of addition is being decreased one by one. And a time will come that only one value you have in your hand, in a particular clone. Right? Am I clear? Till now what I am saying?
Yes, sir.
Shomo?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that
Yes,
clear?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So that means a time will come when only one value will left. And that particular clone which have one value in its hand, and there the clone doesn't have any way basically to call one more clone, because what he will pass? Nothing. There is nothing to pass. And that is the point from where the returning of the result from the last clone will start. The last clone will start the immediate value to the previous clone's second last clone. Then the second last clone will add some, do the other part of the job. And the second last clone will return the partial result to the third last clone. And in this way, it will come back to main. So basically, no clone is solving the problem of 1 to n. Each and every clone is actually passing the value from 1 to minus 1 and keeping n in its hand. So that means, in case of recursive technique, we always keep a dependency. I'm dependent on you, your result. You are also depending on some other's result. And the other person is also depending on some other person. Is that in this way a time come which don't have any way to depend on the last one, next one. And that is the last point. And that is what we call actually base condition. So now question is that since they are clone, that means when you will write the code that will represent the behavior of the function of each and every clone, since the behavior is same, that means there will be basically only one function whose various, physical interpretation will happen at the time of calling from one clone to another clone. So before realizing that, let's try to realize how function communicates with each other. If I have a main and a F1 and F2, and if there is a dependency from a main to F1 and F1 to F2 and F2 to F3, then how the calling and returning strategy happen in a simple function, not in case of a recursive function. Then we will go for recursion. So let's go back. So we were here. So suppose this is the situation. You see in the left hand side, I have written three functions. Here is main function, here is function 1, and here is function 2. What we have seen? That this is a point from where the main function is calling the function 1. And if you go in the definition of function 1, you will see that this is another place from where the function 2 is called from the function 1. And there is nothing in the function 2. Function 2 is doing some job and function is not calling anymore. Now with respect to memory, if you execute this particular code with respect to memory, what will happen? Let's see. You see, the initial situation is something like this. So this box is representing the main function, right? I have two variables a and b over here, and accordingly within this function we will have declaration of two memory location for a and b, where 10 and 20 get stored. I have hard coded it over here, and then I have declared c, and I have not initialized it by some value. That's why I am assuming there is nothing in c right now. And when again fourth line will gets executed, the main function will see that it's a function call of function 1. And not only calling, I am also passing two variable a and b to the function 1, right? So what will happen? We will have a call of this function of function 1 with this two value a and b, that is 10 and 20 as a parameter, and the function 1 will get called. And you see, in this function 1, we have declared int p and int q, because something like, if I want to give you something, suppose that I have two things in my two hands and I want to give it to you, then obviously from your side you must raise both of your hands so that you can take the value that is present, the content that is present in my both hands. If I have two hands, you need two hands also. You cannot say that, logically you cannot say that with only one hand you can take both things that I have in two hands, right? So that means two variables are needed in the side of function 1, and that is why this declaration is needed. And as soon as it is declared, what happened? This 10 will get copied into p. Similarly, b will get copied into q. And it is because of the order. The a is the first parameter when at the time of calling, and p is the first parameter at the time of declaring this function 1. So first will go to the first, second will go to second, third will go to third. This order has to be maintained. So according to that, that's why you can see that now p and q contain 10 and 20 because of this function calling. And also in this definition of this function 1, you see I have t, r, s, 3 variables. Among them, only s contain 30. Other variables I have not initialized till now. So I am assuming that these two locations are blank till now, but s contain 30. That I can see, right? And after doing this, what happened? R equal to P plus Q. This line is executed. As soon as this line will get executed, now the result will get stored in R. So now this R will contain 30 because 10 and 20 was there in P and Q. So addition will be 30 and it gets stored in R. It's okay. And then this particular line will get executed. And what will happen? Now function 1 will see that I have a function call again from function 1. So if I assume in this way that this is the memory address, sorry, not this one, actually always remember function returns to the next line from where it was called. So if we assume that this address of this one is 100 and address of this one is 101, suppose, and suppose address of this calling line is 200, so address of this line is 201, and I have no function call over here, so I don't need to write the memory address of these instructions. Why I have written this one? Because if we assume that we have a stack, we have already seen in the previous slide that stack is a special memory location which is needed to store the memory address from where the control is jumping from one function to another function. So as soon as this particular line will get executed, the address 100 will get stored in the stack. So 100 gets stored in the stack. Fine. And then control jump, and then P and Q has been initialized, R has been computed, and S was already there, and then again we have a function call. And before jumping to function 2, this function 1 will now store this address from where the function is called into the stack again. So 200 it gets stored. Then what happened? Since the function 2 has called, that's why all the part, you see the printf part of main, the return t, this part of the function is resumed. Sorry, these are paused. Because now control has jumped to function 2. So control has jumped to function 2 with this parameter r comma s, and we can see that r is already 30 and s is 30. So that means 30 and 30 will be transferred through the medium, that is nothing but the what we call parameter. And what will happen? A function 2 will get called. And you see in the function 2 side, similarly that we have in function 1 P and Q, we have here x and y. Because when function 1 is calling function 2, basically it is passing r and s. So at least 2 variables are required. And in a similar way, what we have in the order, that has to be maintained. So this r will go to x. This is the x, right? And this is your y, obviously. And this s will go into y, will be copied into y. So that's why 30 had gets stored in the x and y of the function 2. And in this function 2, I have a declaration of z. Because of this, since I have not even initialized it, that's why you see till now z is blank. So what will happen? Now this line will get executed. And as soon as this line will get executed, the result of addition of x and y will get shown in z. So after executing this line, then z will contain 60. 30 plus 30, 60. Done. And then we have this statement. So as soon as as soon as the function 2 will realize that now I have to return. Return means I have to go back. Now where to go back? This is what actually found from this stack. As I told you that stack use last in first out. So whatever last was inserted will be popped out from the stack. So now 200 will not be in the stack. 200 has come out from the stack. And 200 is the address of this function 1. So that's why the return statement, when as we have written, the z will get returned into t, because you have written t equal to 1, 2. So that's why this now z will return to t. And also the control will return back. Something like this. Control has returned back, and this 60 will return to t. And then as soon as the control has returned back from function 2 to function 1, then the other part of the function that was present in the function 1 will start resume. Till now, this returns t was not executed. As soon as the return, the control return back from function 2 to function 1, the other part of the code that is present in the function 1 will start activated, and it will get start executing. Now we can see from this example that after this particular line, we have only one statement, that is return t. So what will happen? In a similar way, what was basically returned from function 2 to function 1, the same thing will get returned to the main function, and not only value will return, control will always return. So that means now the function 1 will start returning to function main, because when function 1 will realize that it has to return, then what it will do? It will again check the content of the stack, and it only contain 100, and that will get popped out from the memory, and it will no more in the memory. This address no more stored, and this is the location where to return back. And according to that, there are some strategy so that the function 1 starts returning to the main in this particular instruction line, that is 100, and within this 100 it is written c equal to, and because of this, whatever t that we have, the value will get returned in c. So the 60 that was in the t over here right now that will get returned in c. And obviously now c will contain 60. And as soon as control return back from function 1 to main, then the other part of the code that was paused for a moment before calling this function 1 from main will start resuming. And we can here see that I have only one statement, that is printing. So now the print statement will execute, and you can see 60 printed on the monitor. That is not possible to show over here, but what we can learn from this situation is that this calling and returning strategy, and this is actually we have discussed in a point in previous slide. We have said that the calling and returning in is exactly in opposite direction. So from this particular slide, we can learn, if we have multiple functions in a program, and if we have some calling from one another, from one to another, then how the calling and returning strategy happen. And we can see that it is exactly, the calling direction is exactly opposite to the returning direction. And that is very true. We can easily realize it scientifically. Now, ultimately, our discussion for this class is to understand recursion. Now, why I am saying this one? The only reason is that recursion is not something out of the world, that is a function itself. Recursion is basically a strategy of calling same function. Now, same function means what? Same function means same function by their name, but different by their physical existence. you can say, you can assume in this way that you have multiple students of the same name in a class. So you have called student 1 with the name, and student 1 has called another student with the same name. The second student has called third student of the same name. So basically calling by the same name is happening, but they are actually different students. But one thing is very important over here, that is, with respect to the example of the students, I can say that students are not clone, but here it is clone. So you can assume that you can have a clone of multiple students, and since they are clone, that's why their name are same, and also their behavior is same. So somehow I will divide the problem into set of sub-problem into such a way that each and every clone will take part in finding the solution, and in a successive way, ultimately I will get the result. So let's jump to now what a recursion is. You see, this is the definition of a recursion. What I have written? The recursion is a process by which a function call itself, up to this one we have discussed. Function call itself. This is very important. But this is much more important, that until a particular condition is satisfied. What does it mean? It means that if you go on calling a function without any foundation, then what will happen? You can assume in this way that you have a main function. Okay. I'm sorry, not main. Maybe you can write a f1 function, and within the f1 function you have called f1 again. So technically you can say it's a recursion. Function is calling itself. So what will happen? This function has a particular physical existence in the memory. Some physical existence. Now when this line will execute, what will happen? This function will call itself. What does it mean? It will call its clone whose behavior is same. So it is also function 1. But it is clone number 1 and it is clone number 2. And again this f1 will call another f1. This is clone number 3. Another f1. Clone number 4. And in this way it will go on continue till infinity, because you have not kept any foundation. Now what problem you will face in this situation is that, since we know that there is in the process of function calling, we have a stack that basically keep track the order of the function that was executed at the time of calling, so that when you start return back, you go in just in opposite direction. That means I have a stack over here also. So you can assume that you have a stack over here. And if I assume that from this 100 line it will get executed, so some address will get stored for the function clone number 1, then for clone number 2, then clone number 3, and then in this way it will go on infinity, which is impossible. The reason is that a machine is not an infinite device. A machine has a memory which is a finite amount. So you cannot play real infinity value in a finite memory machine. And that is the problem we can face if we have a conditionless call. And that is why it is written that recursion is a process by which function call itself until a particular condition is satisfied. Because if the condition is not satisfied, that will stop. I mean, the function call will stop. And as soon as the function call stops, the returning strategy will start. That we have seen over here. That it's called this one, in this one, then in this direction, then it stops over here. If we consider that I have one more function for fun3 from fun2, then obviously from fun2 another function will get called some fun3. and then it will return back over here. It happened, but there is nothing. So it will stop here and it will go and start returning back. Similar thing should over here also. And that is why base condition is so important. So if you don't have base condition, you have a high chance. Actually, it's not possible to, restrict a function calling itself. And our time will come when there will be no space in the stack where it can store the address before jumping. And at that time, what will happen? Error will occur, what we call stack overflow. When we will implement this stack, we have to implement this overflow condition also. Because stack overflow is a very serious situation. If there is no place for storing from where you are jumping, in that case, in case of machine, if the machine can understand, machine cannot store before jumping, then what will happen? Machine will lose its track at the time of return, which is not expected. So that's why it will throw an error. The compiler will throw the error that whatever you are writing is not going to not going to produce a correct result. And this particular condition is actually what we technically call base condition. Okay. And now, that means in case of the necessary condition of a function to be called as a recursive function is this too. It's not only called by itself, but also the base condition has to be present. So that's why I will not say this is other recursion. Recursion must be there something like if some condition, then only you can say, you can call this function f1. And this condition is made in such a way that a time will come when there will be a stop. You cannot say that always condition will be true. It must false at some point of time, and that is the time from where it will start returning back. And ultimately it will come back to main from where the recursion starts. So now let's see how a recursive function works. If we are able to pictorially visualize that in just like in this function what we have pictorially visualized, if we have pictorially visualized the responsibility that is defined by a recursive function, then I think it will be much more clear to your side. So let's see. So suppose that we have a main function over here, and as we have just discussed that we want to find, suppose I am main function and I have given you a responsibility that you add f equal to 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. This is your job. And if you are a recursive function, then what you will do? You will not actually add all these numbers. Rather, you will try to divide the problem into two subproblems at least. And you will try to integrate the result of the two subproblems. That will become the result of the actual problem in your side. So what happened over here, I have seen that I have written that n equal to 4. So here 4 is basically n, and then C variable I have considered where the result will get stored, and then function 1 has been called with this value n. So I have called you. I have given you the responsibility. So you are this function fun1. I'm sorry, here it is fun1, here it is given fun. So it should not be 1, maybe it will become, yes, it will become fun only. Fun1 should not be there. Right, only fun. The function name has to be same. Anyway, so I hope you can understand. So I have called you. Your name is basically fun. I have written according to the code. And what I have given to you, this n. So you will basically get 4 in your hand. So it happens something like this. So this is me. This main function is me. and I have, in this particular situation I have written 5, so it can be 5 also, so it's not a big deal. I mean, instead of 4 it is 5, so it is nothing but 5. Okay, so now what happened, this is me and I have this 5 in my hand. So what I have done, I have called u. As soon as this particular line will get executed, then what will happen, a function of this clone 1 will be created. You see, initially, before, at the time of calling, before we call this particular function, before this third line gets executed, there is no existence of any other functions. That was the point, one of the points present in the first slide. That a function memory block is created only when it is called. Since till now this fun function is not called, so no memory is allocated. So there is nothing in the memory space. If I assume that the whole screen is the memory space, it is nothing is created. As soon as this particular line will get executed, then the first clone will call. Why I am saying clone? Till now you are not state to realize that it is really a clone. But one thing you can say that okay, in your side you have a p variable, so p must contain 5, fine, and you have declared s and p. There is no other value. That's why I have kept them blank for simplicity. And then it is given a condition. You see, this is the condition that basically we were discussing in the previous slide, that in a recursive function you must have a condition before, depends on that you will stop. And this is the condition for stopping, because what you can see, you can keep this 5 in your hand and pass this 4 to one of your another clone, and you are expecting this clone will give the result of 1 to 4, and then what you will do, you will basically do only one addition, not all the additions, right? And that's why you see in the else part, since you can see that you have 5 in your hand, so you have a lot of data. So what you can do, you have called one more of your clone. You have called one more clone. Fun to fun. So, but what you have passed? P minus 1. You see? So basically you are passing 4. Because you don't, you will do the job, but not all the job. You will do a partial job. And the other part of the job will be done by another clone. That is the strategy of recursion. So basically, as soon as this particular line will get executed, what will happen? A clone 2 of the same function fun will get called, but you see, they are physically different. Their name is same. That is what I am saying. Their name is same, but they are physically apart. That is why this clone 2 will have its individual P, S and T, and their scope is limited within this clone. The P, S and T of clone 1, the scope of these 3 variables is limited within the clone 1. The scope of P, S and T is limited within the scope of clone 2. Something like this. Now, since they are clones, since the function name is same, it is also fun, that means naturally behavior will remain same. So that means the way this function 1 is thinking, the fun is thinking, the clone 1 is thinking, in the same way this clone 2 will also think. So what this clone 2 will do? Clone 2 will again see that I have sufficient amount of data in my hand. So I don't need to add till 1 to all. N is equal to 4 is larger than. So this clone 2 will keep 4 in its hand and passes 3 to the another clone. Because of this line. So that's why if you think about the clone 2 part, in case of clone 2, P is equal to 4. So if P equal to 1 false, doesn't matter, P is not 1, so it's come here. And again another fun we called with a P minus 1, that is 3. So another function will call where parameter will be 3. You see, the problem that I was saying that the whole solution is divided into set of sub-problems, the solution of sub-problems. The sub-problems are actually generated because of this particular decrement of the maximum value till which I have to add. Am I clear till now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And Priyanka?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now similarly, you see, since this is same name, same name, that's why again the behavior is same, but it is physically apart. So these variables of the function has a different memory location with respect to other P, S and T of our previous clones. Again, you see that this P is 3, more than 1. So obviously another fun will call. So another fun will get called. It's 2. 2 is also not 1. Another fun got 1. And you see, as soon as this fifth clone will realize that I have 1 in my hand, so fifth clone will see that there is nothing, if I call another clone, then what I will pass? There is nothing to pass. I know that addition, if the maximum value of addition is 1 to 1 means 1, it's trivial. There is no computation needed. And that is a point from where the return will start. So that's why I have kept the base condition as P equal 1 or not. If P equal to 1, that means I'm not going to call any more function. I can directly say, okay, 1 to 1 means 1, result is 1. Now see, one of the very important point that you must realize in this situation is that this is me, right? And these are all you, basically your different clones, and I have given you a responsibility to add 1 to 5. So this should be 5. It should be 5. 1 to 5. So that means from clone 1 point of view, its responsibility is to add 1 to 4. And to do this, it has passed 4 to the clone 2. So if you understand, that means in case of, that means from the you can say, yes, from clone 2 point of view, it has to add 1 to 4. Clone 2 doesn't have any idea about the actual problem. Clone 2's responsibility is to solve only the partial problem. That's all. So all the other clones that we have over here are basically solving the partial additions. And depends on that, basically, you are getting the correct result and returning it. So if I assume that this is a person of one clone, this is clone 2, clone 3. So clone 3 doesn't have any idea the actual problem. Actual problem was add to 1 to 5. But from the clone 3 point of view, actual problem is to add 1 to 4, 1 to 3. So in the last clone, the clone 5 can see that it has to add 1 to 1. So it will basically, it can say that, okay, return 1 directly. There is nothing. S and T is not even needed. So what will happen? It will directly return 1. And as soon as return 1, what will happen? You see, Now, from this clone 4, from this which particular line of the clone 4, this clone 5 was called? In this particular line. Right? So that means when clone 5 will return to its previous clone, it will return in the same function, in the same line. So that means, that's why you see, you can say that you are basically adding, you are returning this S1. So this P, this 1 has been returned to the S of the previous clone. Fine. And then this particular line will get executed. This line is present in each and every clone. But this line of clone 4 will execute right now. Other are in post, because this clone has the control of the clone from clone 1 has jumped to clone 2, then from control of the clone 2 jumped to 3, clone 3, then clone 4, something like this. And when this particular line of clone 4 will get executed, then obviously P plus S, that means we had 2 over here, so 2 plus 1, 3. So 3 will get stored in T. And this T will now return. So that means now this clone 4 will start return. And where it will return? Obviously to clone 3. Because clone 3 was called clone 4. And from where? In which particular line of clone 3 it will return? In the same line, this line itself. Because this line is present in all the clones. So from this particular line of clone 3, this clone 4 was called. So when the result will be returned from clone 4 to clone 3, obviously it will return to the S variable of clone 3, as we have seen. In the previous case, it was here in the S variable of clone 4. So what will happen? The result E is now returned to clone over here, and then this 3 and 3 will get added to get this T equal to 6 for clone 3. Again, after adding this, after executing this particular line of clone 3, return T will execute. Return T statement of clone 3 now. So similarly, this T will now return to S of the clone 2, previous clone, because from this line of clone 2, clone 3 was called. So obviously in the S variable of clone 2, it will return back. And you can see that then again it will add 10 plus 6 plus 4, 10, and which will again return to clone 1, and then again it will be added, and this will now return to the main, because from clone 1 basically called from this particular line. So obviously the clone 1 will return in this particular line, and where? In the C variable. So that's why now C variable will contain this 15, and that is, if you print C, it will print 15. So if this is me and this is you, I can visualize you only, but I cannot visualize this one, this one, this one. They are hidden. From my eye, they are hidden. As if I am getting result from you. The result that the responsibility that I have given to you to add 1 to 5, you are returning back to me. Now, to do this, what you have done, you have taken help of multiple clones in a specific order. That is actually the what we call the strategy that basically you have used is what we call recursion. Now I hope you will able to write program in case of recursive way, in recursive way. right? Actually to realize it, you must need to write program in recursion. So I will suggest that you write some small programs on recursion. For example, this one. Say you implement 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 using recursion. You implement 5 factorial in recursion. You implement find max of an array using recursion. Can you do this? What does it mean? আমার array আছে, I have an array. Okay. And this array contains some haphazard numbers. You have to find out maximum of this number. What you will do? You will write a generally code something like this. You will write a code that max equal to a of 0, then for I equal to 1 to n, if a of I is greater than max, then max equal to a of I was equal to I, something like this. And if you print max, you will get maximum value of the array, because this is the array, some value is present. You consider that this is your max initially, and if you start journey from 1 to last, and if you find some value is greater than this max, you are updating this max, right? And also updating its position. If you want, you can do that. And when this loop will break, you will end at over here, you have the maximum value present in this max variable, right? Now, this particular approach is what we call iterative approach. But if I ask you what can be the recursive approach, what you can do? What idea should come in your mind? I mean, I'm giving you a hint. You try to do it in your home. I'll give you overview of the solution. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 2, 7, 3, 1, 5, 9, 8, 6. Okay. So now this is, I want to find out maximum of this particular array. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So one thing, I can use this approach. I mean, I can use, not, I will call you. This is main. This is me. This is me. I have called you. You are, say, max function. Okay. So one thing, you can use this approach. But this is an iterative approach. And assume that you are lazy. You are very lazy. So if you are lazy, then you will not take responsibility to find the maximum by yourself only. No. What you will do, your intention will try to divide the problem into at least two subproblems. So what you can do? You can say that, okay, suppose that this is not me, this is actually some user. Okay, and this is me. So I am this lazy function. So what I can do, I can divide the array into two parts, logically. I can logically divide the array into two parts. This is a logical division, not array remains same, okay. Some logically I have divided two parts. This is one part. Another part is this. And I have given Soumya to find maximum of this. And I have given Priyanka to find maximum of this part. So what Soumya will return to me? Somehow Soumya will return 7. How Soumya is returning 7, I am not bothered about right now. And what value will return by Priyanka? Will 9. Suppose the maximum value returned from this part is by x, is in x, in my variable, and the maximum value of this part, this logical part, as returned by Priyanka, is in my y variable. So what I will check? I will check if x greater than y, then x is max, or else y is max. You see, I have not done anything. I am not checking everything. I am not checking all of these things. I am checking only one. Because I have given responsibility to find the maximum of half to one of you and another half to other student. Question is that suppose that this Soumya and Priyanka is my clone. They are recursive function. I am recursive function. So they are my clone.
Okay. Yeah.
So that means the way that I am thinking to find the maximum of the whole array, in the same way Soumya will think to find the maximum of the subpart. In the same way Priyanka will think to find the maximum of this second half.
Mhm.
And in this way it will recursively go on continuing. So I will not tell you anything more about the solution. Now you try to make a concrete solution and implement the code for finding the maximum of the array using recursive approach. So this is a hint, or you can say a path that I have given you so that you can construct a concrete solution. Okay. This is this representation, me. This one. This is clone 1. Assume that this is clone 1. Soumya is clone 2. Priyanka is clone 3. And maybe Oka will be clone 4. And go on continuing till what? That is very important.
Yeah.
Because Soumya will again divide into 2 parts and give the responsibility to other 2 clones to find the maximum of this part, and then Soumya will think about its own x and y, which is max, and depends on that it will return to me. And it will go on, now you think, I will not tell you. I don't want to tell you anymore. Try to give a shape of this solution properly by coding. Okay?
Yeah.
So we can stop over here for today. In the next class, we will basically see how we can use this recursive function for different type of problems. For example, the sorting algorithms that we were discussing, and we know that merge sort and quick sort are there, which are very important sorting algorithm which needs this recursive function. So we will see that how we can use this recursive approach in those cases in the next class. Bye.